It's a great pleasure to be here with you today. I was asked to speak in English. If you have questions, you can ask in Greek as well. As far as I could understand, I think Professor Samanidi, Sophia, gave you a short summary of my talk.
No,
I could understand
your biography.
Yeah, and then I could understand a few words, so I figured out that it was something relating to the talk. Okay, I should start by saying that I'm a theoretical linguist, and often when we talk about language and gender, this is a topic which is really very favorite to social linguists for reasons that will become apparent. But very recently, there are hot discussions about this issue, and it's a topic that is not just restricted to social linguists. Now, I've put this question, is Greek a sexist language, in quotation marks, because it's a question that is often addressed in general public discussions. So we should start with a very, I'm sure you're all familiar with the definition of sexism. It's actions or attitudes that discriminate against people based solely on their gender. And of course, we can already tell the answer to the question, given that attitudes or actions hold of individuals, and sexism then cannot be a property of language if we consider language as an abstract mental object, something that we've got in our mind. But at the same time, because this knowledge comes to use, right? We are speakers, we put it into use for the purposes of communication. We can use our language to reflect our attitudes towards other people on the basis of their gender. Now, why would we raise such a question when it comes to Greek? Is there a particular property of Greek that would trigger this kind of question? I think that in Georgian, because we don't have gender distinctions, this is a question that does not arise. So first we need to discuss gender. How is gender defined? Here I've just put one from Linguistics Encyclopedia, that in everyday speech the word gender is associated with the biological and social differences between women and men. In addition, people might know that languages can have masculine or feminine words, and this is the latter that we refer to as grammatical gender. Okay? And of course, we know that nowadays we have at least two definitions of gender. One is the biological gender, the way we are born. This is anatomical. But we also have what we call the social gender, that is the identity that we define with respect to our behavior. And there, the definition of gender is not just man or woman, right? There are different varieties, shades of gender. Now, in English, the word gender is used to refer to the complex of social, cultural, and psychological phenomena attached to sex. So there is the distinction between sex and gender, which has to do with the social aspect. But also the word gender is used in linguistic discussions. It's a technical term. And in this sense, it's a grammatically significant classification of nouns. So we use the word gender also in our grammars as a way of classifying nouns depending on the various properties that they have. Okay? So our point of inquiry. Let me start with some examples from Greek. So if we look at the example in one, I have the word fitites, which is students, in the plural. And if you look at the gloss underneath, I've put this M, which means that its gender is masculine, right? This is the grammatical gender. In 1b, I have the quantifier oli, and again, this, the way it inflects is classified as masculine. And of course, the question is that if they are masculine in terms of their grammatical gender, does this mean that they can only refer to male entities, or can they include all gender individuals? Right? Then we have an example like in 2. They accept applications for the position of to Brittany. Again, this is should be glossed as masculine. We can see the article 2. And the question is whether that means that if I want to apply for that position, I'm excluded because my gender is a sex, right? Or social gender is female. So does this mean that if I see this kind of sentence, this only refers to male individuals? At the same time, if we look at 3, there is no such confusion. If I say in a FTTs, masculine, of linguistics, I understand that I refer to, I can see this in English, in the translation, I use the pronoun he. But if I use the word fititria, in a fititria, which is feminine, so it's a slightly different form, then in English I would use the pronoun she, okay? So in one case we use the masculine gender as inclusive, but there are also sentences, there are structures where the distinction between masculine and feminine does not give us this inclusiveness, okay? At the same time, what we observe is that we are more reluctant to accept this kind of duplicates, the pairs that you see in 4A and 4B, for example. That's why we have the happy face. I can have a masculine form, kathigidis, and I can also have kathigitria for the feminine, magiras, which is cook, magirisa, which is for the feminine. It's okay to say dikastis, dikastria. I think by now some people accept it. Or pritanis, pritanisa, that would be the normal one, but as you can see, it could be either a neutral term or it could be something that people find that it's not of a high status. So, from what we've seen with these examples, it seems that we have two apparently conflicting requirements. On the one hand, we want to have inclusive language, inclusive terms, that is, words that can include all genders, not just male, female, right? Because, as we said, gender is can also be defined in social terms and cultural terms. So we want to have neutral terms that can include all genders so that our language does not reflect these gender distinctions. But at the same time, there are certain cases where our language, we want our language to be non-inclusive, that is, to discriminate between whether certain properties hold of men or women. Okay? That would be the case of professor, student, and the rest. In a recent, that's not a paper, it was an interview in a popular magazine. Alvanoudi and Tsiplakou, they're both social linguists. They do also critical discourse analysis, Alvanoudi as well. They say that the gender that we see, the grammatical gender, continues to reflect, construct, and preserve male dominance. That's why we use the masculine. Or at the level of the language system or grammar, language constructs gender and reproduces male dominance through the grammatical or lexical gender. Okay? So they take the view that what we see as grammatical gender, the classification of nouns, when it comes to human entities, it takes a form that reflects our attitudes, the attitudes that hold in the society. I do not quite agree with their classification. I think grammatical gender is an independent entity. So for those of you who are not familiar with Greek, and you also speak a language that doesn't have this kind of distinctions, let's see what we refer to when we use the term grammatical gender. Greek has a three-way gender distinction in the nominal system: masculine, feminine, neuter. So a word like kypos, ending in os, is classified as masculine. A word like varka, boat, with the ending a, is classified as feminine. Plio with the ending o is classified as neuter, right? These are all non-human inanimate entities, and there is no semantic reason why kypos should be masculine, varka should be feminine. It's completely arbitrary because of the inflectional endings that we see. So in that respect, if we take Corbett's view, Greek has a formal gender system, right? Because there are also languages where the gender system can reflect semantic properties. So you would find the masculine or feminine depending on the sex, right, of the entity. So in inanimate entities, we would expect to find neuter unless people animate certain entities and attribute them the equivalent gender. Now, the way, the endings that we see in each of these words, they categorize, they classify nouns in different inflectional classes, right? How we inflect the noun. So we have as, is, os, as. These are all masculine. So you can see that here what makes a noun masculine is the s ending. Okay? The absence of the s ending classifies the nouns. So we have a, e, classifies them as feminine, but we see that nouns ending in os, like adelphos, brother, or isodos, entrance, they hold for both gender distinctions. They could be either masculine or feminine. And then when we look at the neuter, we have the endings that you see in the final. Okay? And again, we find os with the neuter. Okay? Riley offers a different classification. She has about 8 inflectional classes. So the first one has all the nouns ending in os. So as you can see, this could be masculine or feminine. It's completely arbitrary. Then in the inflectional class 2, we only have masculine, and this could be nouns ending in as, is, es, us, okay, like papus. Inflectional class 3 has only feminine, and that could be mitera, vli, so ending in a, I, u. Yeah, these are the ones. Inflectional class 4, which is also feminine in e, they only differ with respect to the formation of the plural from the inflectional class 3. And then we have 3 inflection classes for neuter. Since neuter is all particularly relevant, I'm not going to discuss it in very much detail. So what we observe, at least as far as grammar is concerned, is that there is no one-to-one correspondence between inflectional class and gender. Okay? So we can have masculines falling in different inflection classes, feminine in different inflection classes, because this classification precisely reflects the way words inflect with respect to case and number. But at the same time, what we observe is that the affix os occurs with masculine, feminine, and neuter nouns, and in particular, masculine and feminine inflect in exactly the same way. All masculine nouns have s in the nominative as the cited form. Feminine nouns have a vocalic ending, just a vowel, a thematic vowel, and nouns ending in e can be feminine or neuter. Now, according to Rally's analysis, gender is a feature of the nominal stem. Okay? So in a way, it's the stem that determines that now I'm going to be feminine, and if I'm going to be feminine, like avli, if you look at 6, yard, right, that will take the ending e, or it could be a, right? So it's completely arbitrary, and as kids, when they learn Greek as part of acquisition, they have to learn which word belongs to which gender. There can be mistakes, of course, right? But kids are very good with morphology, and they figure out these kind of distinctions early on. If we look at the word kipos, right? Kip would be the stem. We put the ending o, so we consider this, at least according to Rally's discussion, that it's stem that could be classified as masculine or feminine. Why? Because os refers to both genders. And the other thing that we observe is that articles and adjectives also inflect depending on gender, and we see that this is reflected in syntactic properties when it comes to what we call pronoun binding in 7. So if okipos is masculine, the garden, then I want to refer to the garden's flowers, I will use the masculine pronoun tu. Okipos με τα λουλούδια του, his, right? Exactly as in English. At the same time, we know that the derivational affixes, so we have inflectional affixes, the ones that determine the inflectional class, but we also have derivational affixes, augmentative or diminutives, which also function like stems, that is, they determine the gender, the grammatical gender. So the word tokoritsi, the girl, is neuter. There is no particular reason why, right? As we said, it's arbitrary, although it refers to female individuals. And if I put the aros, augmentative affix, that will give me masculine. You see that in either case there is no matching with sex, right? The gender, the biological gender. Similarly, when we have the word toagori, which is the boy, neuter again, if I use the augmentative ina, agorina, right, that changes its grammatical gender from neuter to feminine, although we know that the reference is to male individuals, okay? And Aki always gives us neuter, so I can start with a feminine noun, Alexia, and that will give me to Alexaki. Neuter, I can see that on the article, or I can have O Alexis, which is the masculine name, Alex, and that can give me the diminutive to Alexaki, it can be a affectional term, and again it's neuter, okay? So that tells us two things. Gender is arbitrary. Okay, it just gives me, it classifies nouns to inflectional classes. Derivational affixes that can give us augmentatives or diminutives are like stems, and they can also change the gender in completely arbitrary ways. Okay. So what we see is that grammatical gender is arbitrary, independent of sex or social gender. However, when the reference is to a human, there is a tendency for maximizing correspondence between the two. So the word for woman, gyneka, is feminine in gender. Kori, daughter, is feminine in gender. Adelphi, sister, is feminine in gender. And equivalently, andras, man, is masculine. Yos, son, is masculine. Adelphos is masculine. But recall that when we have the words for boy and girl, this would be neuter, okay? So there is a tendency, but it doesn't mean that the mapping is one-to-one again. So if that was all, we wouldn't have a problem. But when it comes to professional nouns, we see that there are some tendencies to maximize reference with respect to the biological gender or sex. Okay. So when we have what we call the epicene, are nouns that have the same form for feminine and masculine. And from what we've seen so far, these are the nouns ending in os. Okay. So if I have a iatros, doctor, we know that it can be either men or women who are doctors. Dikigoros, lawyer, again could be men or women. When it comes to the inflectional class, we know that os could be either masculine or genitive, so masculine or feminine. So how do I distinguish? I just use, I do it syntactically, right? When I put the masculine article, o iatros, then I know that I refer to a male individual. If I use I iatros, then I know that I refer to a female individual, because as you can see in the table here, the definite article in Greek, and the indefinite as well, inflects for gender. So maybe that wouldn't be a very serious problem, but when we come to the other classes, inflectional classes, where certain classes can only be masculine and certain other can only be feminine, so we have the word for kathigitis, so this is masculine, the gender, and the way to refer to a female professor is to use derivational morphology. So I take as my basis kathigit, this is the stem, I put the ria, and that will give me the female entity. So that's very productive, because we said in derivational morphology allows us to determine or to change a gender class. Χορευτής, dancer, χορεύτρια, fine, εργάτης, εργάτρια, worker, it's perfectly fine. Or if I have the masculine in as, μάγειρας, μαγείρισα, that would be the feminine, βασιλιάς, βασίλισσα, μανάβης, μανάβισσα. Okay? Now, when it comes to nouns that denote certain professions or positions of a higher status, we see that this is not very acceptable for reasons that have to do with style. It's not grammar, for sure. So when I have the word for rector, Pritanis, in most of the documents one will see that the resolution determining the gender will be done syntactically by changing the definite article. So I would have O Pritanis for masculine, E Pritanis for feminine, although it is perfectly possible, as in the case of Kathikitis or Magiras, Manavis, to have Pritanisa. Okay? When it comes to the word for dean, Kosmitoras, sorry, there should have been an S here. Again, in more formal styles, we choose the syntactic resolution, although it's perfectly fine to say Kosmitoris, right, to have the derivation of morphology. Vουλευτής, Βουλεύτρια, διοικητής, manager, διοικήτρια. Okay, διοικήτρια is more acceptable. So the question is, why all of a sudden, while the grammar allows it, we are so much reluctant to accept these kind of formations, but also the pairs that we see in 12a-b as opposed to 13a and b just show that it's not an issue that has to do with grammar, but it's an issue that has to do with our attitudes. At the same time, these are positions which, at least in Greece, they're male dominant. Okay, so that's why we have this kind of male dominance and hierarchy. There are few women holding this kind of positions, and the idea is that, okay, you got that far, just keep the masculine form, and you can be disambiguated by the definite article, although it's perfectly fine to use the female forms. And that's what we would call nowadays, it's a kind of a linguistic activism, right? So people say, why would you use the derivational form? When it comes to positions or professions that are not very much female dominant, I think it's necessary to show that we also exist. And since the grammar allows us to do so, to use the feminine forms, okay? So when it comes to the OS class, okay, there it's straightforward because these are stems that are underspecified for gender, while the other classes are specified for gender. So disambiguating between what you see in 14 as opposed to 15, by using the article, it's more acceptable as opposed to the ones in 15, which is more unnatural because we don't have feminine nouns ending in is or as, right? They're all masculine. So this is what the grammar tells us. We can see, these are again the examples that we have in 16. So some of them are very acceptable, but some others are not so acceptable. As you can see, the one that I put in blue, Vουλεύτρια, which means the member of parliament, right, for women. I'm not saying that it works in all cases, so if we have the word politis, which is a citizen, we can say politisa, it's fine. Politis, politria, so it doesn't mean that they all follow the same derivational affix, but the point I want to make here is that there is no need to use just to disambiguate it at a syntactic level, because the grammar, the language makes available different derivational morphemes to have the feminine and the depending on the basic form. Okay, so we can have kalitechnis, kalitechnika, Pritanis, Pritanis, and the rest. But we should bear in mind that also the formation of the feminine takes the masculine as its base form. Okay. Now there is this tendency of using also, when it comes to the os nouns, which could be masculine or feminine. This is the inflectional class. We observe that the tendency is to have a different form for a feminine noun. So we have glossologos that could be construed as masculine only. The glossologa would be the feminine. It might be less acceptable when it comes to cardiologist or the physician or the chemist, right? It's true, even for me, they're not, they don't sound very well. But we can have other formations like physikina, cardiologina, they're just considered of lower status. Okay, so again, the grammar allows us to have all sorts of different formations to make gender distinctions. So it's our attitudes, we have to accept them, and many women wouldn't accept these kind of formations because they consider that this will diminish their status when they hold this kind of professions. So it's a matter of attitudes. Okay, so if we have the male priest, papas, I don't think anybody would say I papas. We had I papisa. Okay, I think I've seen the form papadi. Okay. Or a periphrasis like gyneka papas, that is a woman priest. Okay, I think I can skip this one. It's just from a psycholinguistic discussion where they gave to certain individuals, their subjects in the experiment, non-words, and they just tried to see whether the ending would help people determine gender. So there are certain observations. So in this first part, the remarks are as follows, that is, professional names are not necessarily a problem for grammar, but they are a problem for speakers because of our attitudes. Inflectional affixes are not gender carriers, but they may select stems specified for gender. This is what morphology tells us. When we have os nouns, reference is determined outside grammar. So if I have the word glossologos, which is a linguist, it ends in os, it could be masculine or feminine because of the inflectional class. And if in my mind I have that it's so and so, you know, women are also visible in that profession, it's not a problem. If I have the word surgeon, chirurgos, right, in Greek, or chirurgos, wherever we put the stress, I think what will come to my mind at first, that the picture of the person will be a man, okay? But that, the same holds in English, right? English doesn't have gender, and if you use the word surgeon, I think most people will think that it's a male and not a female. Okay,
like but say president or things
yeah,
like
or president, right?
Or chair,
yeah. So in all these cases, because we are this is what we are familiar with. Okay, so it's not a language problem; it's a society problem. Okay. So when it comes to grammar, referent ambiguities can be resolved either morphologically or syntactically by using the separate act. Let's come to the birthday cake. That's the second question. So these are the pride comments, right? Can grammatical gender be all gender inclusive? And by all gender, I mean all gender, right? Not the biological gender only, but what we have with respect to what we call non-binary. So we have our original examples. So we use the masculine. So if I say, if it is masculine came to the class, would we think that it's only men that attend my class? No, the way we use the masculine is that it will be inclusive, so I know that it can be men or women, and the same holds with all. But nowadays, I think again, for reasons that have to do with visibility, is that the reason why the masculine gender has been considered inclusive is just a convention, right? There is, at least there doesn't seem to be any grammatical basis as to why it would be, or there could be, but it needs further explanations. So one way to allow for both, you know, to make it clear that my students are both men and women is to use both genders. So I could say, ifitites, masculine, και ifititries, feminine, came to the class. But then note that we have another problem because, again, this is binary, right? It's only men, women. And in a way, strictly speaking, according to what we know nowadays about gender, it's not all gender inclusive, right? Mm-hmm. Because somebody who identifies themselves as non-binary would say, well, I'm excluded, right? So, you know, we try to solve one problem, but then we come across other problems, but it's okay. I mean, this is how society works. So the point I want to make is that it's not about language, it's about, you know, our beliefs and attitudes. So a second solution that is becoming very popular, especially between you know, activists, is what we have in 23, and social linguists, is that we can use the neuter form as well. So we could say ifitites, masculine, ifititries, feminine, και τα φοιτητά, which is neuter, came to my class. Okay? Okay, if you try to speak like that whenever you want to address a big audience, it's not very easy, but there are people who do it very consistently. Okay. And although it sounds fine in the singular, when it comes to the neuter, it sounds fine in the plural, because we have pluralities of entities, pluralities of individuals. When it comes to the singular, it's not so good. It sounds a bit odd. Ophiditis, ophiditreke, tophidito. It's a kind of derogative, okay? So it would be the masculine, the feminine, and the neuter. And again, we would have the same problem with pronouns. And that now raises a different linguistic question. How is the neuter gender interpreted? Right? I think that's a perennial and eternal question. What is neuter? I think this is something that the ancient grammarians had to face. Does it mean that it includes both genders, or is it that it includes neither? It makes no distinction. Because if it is the latter, it makes no distinction, then we should just use the neuter instead of the masculine throughout if we wanted this to be the inclusive gender. Okay? So it's not very clear. Another solution that has been adopted, especially by the LGBT community, but this only works in writing, is to put the at sign instead of the suffix. So in the position where you would expect to find the inflectional apps, so I just have the stem in 25 ifidit, ήρθαν στο μάθημα, came to the class. So, you know, just by putting the at sign, it could be interpreted as either masculine or feminine or non-binary, right, for that reason. But this is something that would only work for written language. Italian also has the same problem as Greek problem in quotation marks. And I think there the tendency is just to drop the ending altogether, right? Wow. Just to have the stem. Wow. But this is a massive distraction. It means that I don't want to have any kind of inflectional morphology in my language, right? Which raises other questions, because these things do not happen from one day to the other. Okay. So there are some problems because it makes the correspondence between phonology and orthography very opaque. And it still takes the masculine stem as its base, because, you know, defining something as masculine or feminine, if it is a property of the stem, it doesn't really resolve the issue. Because if I want to have the, you see, we put the at after fidit, but the actual stem for the feminine is fiditr. It needs the r as well, okay? So again, although we try to avoid this kind of denoting or referring to masculine, you know, you see that we cannot affect it. And at the same time, that takes us, so on the one hand, we want to be gender inclusive, but on the other hand, remember, we want to enhance the presence of, via the feminine gender, the presence of women. And what we achieve this way is that it makes the feminine forms less productive, right? Because it says, take the stem, put the at. So, you know, instead of advancing on using feminine forms, it means that you make them less productive. Other solutions, some people use this. Capius capia used both as a compound, as in 26, someone, masculine, feminine, philes, phili. Okay, so we can do it, but obviously we cannot do it in all cases. Whether we would put the feminine or the masculine first, I think it has to do with rhythm, it's a prosody. And again, this solution is binary and not all inclusive. So I think this is where we have certain limits when it comes to the grammar, the way it works. And if you don't want to have this kind of limitation, then you need to drop all your inflectional morphology and become either like Georgian or English. Right? Okay. Furthermore, would these solutions work outside the word when it comes to syntax? Okay, let's try and check this on some syntactic patterns, coordination and what we call predicative agreement. I would say ifitites και ifititries είναι χαρούμεν. I need an ending, right? Because, you know, I cannot just say, even kids know that we need an ending. And the same in the accusative, είδα τους φοιτητές και τις φοιτήτριες χαρούμεν. You know, I saw the student masculine and the student feminine happy. And then I need to put an ending because this is, otherwise it's not well formed morphologically. And also from studies, here I just referred to 2 of them, but there are many more, that have to do with agreement in coordination. The way it goes is something like what you see in 30 and 31. Ο άντρας, masculine, και η γυναίκα είναι έξυπνη, smart, it takes the masculine ending. Η γυναίκα, in 30b, η γυναίκα, feminine, και το παιδί, neuter, είναι έξυπνη, again, it takes the masculine, right? So that tells us something that it's arbitrary, but there must be some basis that says that here I want to have the masculine to include also feminine and neuter. But when we look at 31, we have inanimate entities, ο πίνακας, masculine, the board, και η καρέκλα, the chair, feminine, or το πεζοδρόμιο, the sidewalk, which is neuter, είναι βρώμικα, then the resolution goes in favor of the neuter. Okay? So before we become very dismissive or try for alternative solutions, we need to bear in mind that while masculine covers both feminine and masculine when we have coordination, if we have inanimate entities, irrespectively of their grammatical gender, the predicate will be in the neuter form. Okay? And there has been some relatively recent work on pronouns and inferences, that is, what sort of inferences we draw with respect to gender. So these are the cases we have in 32. Κάποιος φοιτητής έβαψε το δωμάτιό του. Here, if I have disjunction, some student masculine or some student feminine, I would go for the masculine, right? It sounds, if I use the feminine, it would mean that I only refer to the female student, okay? This is why it sounds odd in 32b. Again, we have the problem with the predicative agreement when we take the other options. And of course, we can avoid some of these problems by using generic collective terms like φοιτητόκοσμος, meaning the crowd, the world of students, right? And again, we will see, it's still masculine, right? Because cosmos, which is the second compound, it's masculine, right? But it does not refer to male only, right? Because it's group, it's a collective term, and then we see this kind of agreement. Okay, going back to the study by Roussou and Patras, and I will explain what this means. They say that we can, in terms of gender inferences, we can have a slightly different classification that does not follow grammatical gender. I will explain to you what these formulae mean. So the denotation, that is the meaning of a word, this is the double, that we see here in 37a, αδελφός, right? That is the lambda structure that we say, that it refers to an individual which is male and also has the property of being sibling. Αδελφή is the denotation that means that I refer to an individual which is a female and also has the property of being sibling. Okay? When it comes now to nouns like γιατρός, these are inflections that could hold either for feminine or masculine, male or female entities, because os is underspecified for gender. Then what they have observed is that some of them have no lexical specification for gender, while they can give a gender inference. So if we think of γιατρός, as in 38a, here the inference is that it could be, it's not specified, it could be male or female, but when we have δάσκαλος, that would be, although it's on S, os, it would be teacher, because we also have the pair δασκάλα, which is denoted, part of its meaning is that it is female and teacher, and the way to show this is the following. If you look at the examples in 40, if we say, ο Πέτρος δεν έχει κανένα γιατρό, masculine, Petros has no doctor, then my inference would be either male or female, right? But if I say, ο Πέτρος δεν έχει καμία γιατρό, my only inference can be for a female doctor. It cannot be that he has no male doctor, right? Similarly, in 41, ο Πέτρος δεν έχει κανένα δάσκαλο στην Κατερίνη. It could mean that he works in a school where there is no teacher, either man or woman. But if we put the feminine, ο Πέτρος δεν έχει καμία δασκάλα στην Κατερίνη. Here the inference could only be to a female, right? Goes according to the inflection class, but no reference to a male teacher. I think this is an important study because it shows also how when we learn our mental lexicon, there are certain associations that we make beyond the grammatical gender, and that allows us to draw certain inferences, and inferences have to do with pragmatics. Okay, so it's the meaning, semantics, plus the pragmatics component. Similarly in 42a, ο Πέτρος και η Μαρία είναι δάσκαλοι στην Κατερίνη, so Peter, masculine, man, και η Maria, feminine. Here we would take the masculine form. It's like the cases we saw before with coordination. But if I were to say, ο Πέτρος και η Μαρία είναι δασκάλες στην Κατερίνη, then my inference would be that ο Πέτρος is a woman. Okay? And here I have a conflict with the grammatical gender because I have used the o. So I know that its grammatical gender is refers to, it's a proper name also. And I know that Petros is a proper name for men. Okay? The same in 43, ο Πέτρος και η Μαρία είναι καλοί γιατροί, again masculine, what we saw before, but we wouldn't be able to say καλές γιατροί unless Petros is a woman, okay? But again, I'm using the wrong article, if Petros is indeed a woman, I'm using the wrong article for this noun, okay? So, some concluding remarks with respect to the second part of the talk, and that will be almost the final. That's the ending. When it comes to the inclusive gender, adopting a coordinate structure with masculine and feminine is binary and one-way inclusive, in a way, but we cannot avoid it. Adopting a masculine-feminine compound is also binary, what some people do, and it's very, very limited in production, so we cannot do it in all cases. Adopting a coordinate structure does not solve the gender issue, because we saw that when syntax takes over, that is, I do not just have the noun phrase, with coordination, but I need to form a sentence, I have a predicate, I have to put an ending, or I have a pronoun which needs to be bound, then we see that the grammar has its own way, either masculine or neuter, depending on other features, grammatical features like animacy. And gender is a grammatical property, so we shouldn't be that concerned when it comes to syntax, because it does not really reflect anything when it comes to properties like sex, at least in languages like Greek where gender is a grammatical property. Nouns may be lexically specified or unspecified for gender, and they can also give rise to different pragmatic inferences. So syntax is, as I call, because I'm a syntactician, right? It's a dumb system. You know, it just sees certain features, it puts things together and doesn't care about the world, what happens outside our mind. But when it comes to pragmatics, right, the pragmatics is really, it's the enrichment of what syntax produces after semantics takes over. And when we have pragmatic differences, this is our knowledge of the world. So certain attitudes take priority. And we could see that to the inferences, I say καλοί γιατροί, then I can refer to both genders, but if I say καλές γιατροί, then my inference would be towards a certain position. Rewiring this kind of inferences, it's very difficult, right? I think we cannot do it. So one would say, so why would we bother about having, you know, why do we insist of having using feminine terms when it comes to professions? And I think this is really, it's not a language issue, but it's a sociological issue. And especially when we are in positions or professions which are male dominant, one way, this is why it's been termed language or linguistic activism, you know, to show that we are equal, is to use this even if at some point it becomes unnecessary. Right? So how is the inclusive issue resolved? Only partially, right? And use of gender-neutral terms is one option. So for example, now we have these guides of how to use, to avoid, it's also a European Union guidance rule, how to avoid gender distinctions in official documents. And one of the recommendations is try to use terms which are gender neutral. So, you know, if I want to refer to the administrative staff in my university, instead of saying I diοικητικοί, right, then I could use the term personnel, right, which is neuter, and it could include both feminine, male and female entities. Or for professors, I could say, you know, there is a term, melidep, which again would be neuter and could include, it would be gender inclusive. So when it comes to action in official documents, there are cases where we can avoid this kind of distinction by using collective terms, which could be either masculine, feminine. In most cases, they're neuter, and that way we can be all gender inclusive. So thank you very much.